Hi, everybody. I'm back for another English 3 lecture. Um, Once again, I want to remind you that these lectures are completely optional. Everything you need to complete this week's NTI work is available in your printed packets, which you can pick up from the school. You can call the school and have those delivered either to your home or to your closest elementary school, and you can pick them up there. Or you can access them through the NTI link on the district website. Um, but if, like me, you find it much easier to learn things when you have heard them discussed out loud, I want to make this available to you too. But it's completely optional. If you want to spend your Mondays with me until we finish up this school year, I'll be here for you. This week, we are still in modernism, which is likely how we will finish up the year. But this week we are studying kind of a movement within the movement of modernism, and that is the Harlem Renaissance. This is a particular community of African American writers and artists that flourished during the 1920s. And in your packet, you're going to see an introduction from the American Academy of Poets, a very good introduction about what the Harlem Renaissance was, how it worked, and what sort of developed from it, what grew from it. The first thing you need to know is a little bit of history. And I don't want to step on Miss Middleton's ground here, but some of this stuff you really need to know if you don't know it already. For one thing, the early 20th century was a truly terrible time to be African American and living in the South. Not that there were great times before this, but the early 20th century is particularly bad. This is the era of segregation. This is when African Americans are being lynched in the South. It's a dangerous, violent, unhealthy time to be African American and living south of the Mason-Dixon line. Into that cultural condition in 1917 strolls World War I. And what World War I does is take young, healthy laborers who had been working in industrial cities and manufacturing and things like that, which at this time in history was very, very human driven. Somebody turned every bolt in the equipment that they made on factory floors. So World War I took those young, healthy laborers and sent them to Europe to fight in the trenches. So industrial cities were begging for people to do that kind of work. The result of that is, in great numbers, the African American men who did not go to war moved to the industrial cities of the North to take manufacturing jobs. And this forever changed the culture of the big industrial cities of the North, like Detroit and Chicago, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, and New York City. This Great Migration, when it hits, this is called the Great Migration, and this Great Migration, when it hits New York City, runs right into the fertile ground that the modernist movement in the arts has been tilling during this time. Cultural critics are eager for new voices, and what develops is a very vibrant African American arts and cultural scene centered on the neighborhood of Harlem, which is where many of these Southern transplants moved when they came to New York. The Harlem Renaissance created, for one thing, jazz, which many cultural critics would say was the most important development of the modernist movement. Now, keep in mind that it's not as if African Americans had not been creating art all this time. It just, there's a certain privilege to having the time to create art, to being allowed to do so, and to be able to share that outside of your own kind of cloistered community. And we had not seen that previously. So it's very difficult today to convey to you how influential the Harlem Renaissance actually was. You are steeped in the results of the Harlem Renaissance day after day in your ordinary life. You just don't realize it. You have come to take it for granted. But just to give you one example, a couple of developments to come out of the Harlem Renaissance were jazz and blues. Without jazz and blues, rock and roll never develops, to say nothing of hip-hop and rap. But if rock and roll never develops, even today's country music doesn't sound like the country music that you're listening to. It would sound more like bluegrass. So the results of the Harlem Renaissance were extremely influential. And let me talk a little bit about what we're doing this week. We're going to read a collection of poems by Langston Hughes, who is probably the best known figure of the Harlem Renaissance. We're going to read a few of those. We're going to read a longer poem by County Cullen, and then we're going to read a short essay by Zora Neale Hurston. And it sounds like a lot of reading, but Hughes' poems are short, and all this work is fairly straightforward. So it's going to feel like much easier reading than what you have been doing. And aside from that, you only have one writing assignment to turn in for this week. You're going to take all of that reading and synthesize it into a single, depending on what class you're in, either a 3.8 paragraph or a more complex paragraph. None of this, your writing assignments this week don't come to more than a page at most. So here's where I want you to start. As you read the introduction, and that's the first thing you should read, I want you to make some notes for yourself. Thus far, we have been working from sidebars that the textbook provides. In this case, I want you to make your own sidebar. I want you to make a list of at least 3 elements or principles of the Harlem Renaissance that you feel like define it. Now, you're not going to turn that into me, but you're going to use it for your writing assignment at the end of the week. So read the introduction carefully, make notes on what elements you think are important to calling something a Harlem Renaissance piece. Then, as you read the essay and the poems, I want you to see if you can apply those ideas to this essay and these poems. At the end of the week, English 3 students will complete a 3.8 paragraph, just like we've done a million of all year long. Applying your elements of the Harlem Renaissance, the things you came up with yourself out of your reading, to the literary works. So choose 3 principles and 3 examples from the poems or from the essay. You can mix and match that however you'd like to. Now, AP Language and Composition students will complete the week with something slightly more nuanced, but it still doesn't need to be long, maybe 150 words. Some of you use more words to convey the same ideas than others do. And you know if you're somebody who's going to need more than 150 words, but it can be done in 150. I want you to explain, using evidence from both the literature and the introduction, how the Harlem Renaissance fits into modernism as a movement. So what you're looking for there is how those two fit together, how the Harlem Renaissance is a modernist movement. And to help you focus, if this were an essay test, and that's the way you should treat it, treat this as if it's an essay test question and answer it that way. the key question here is, other than the fact that they coincide in time, why is the Harlem Renaissance considered a movement within modernism? How is it, too, a modernist development? And that's it. So you only have one writing assignment this week. Most of what you're going to be doing is reading. I still miss you guys a whole lot. I wish I could see you. But we're going to get through this, and we will get to see each other again. Maybe just not this year. And that, I know it's been a hard week since we realized that. But I will at least be here with you every Monday until school is out. And maybe after that, I don't know. The cats are bored with me. Please take care. Please stay safe. And please email me, call me, text me, anything you need to do. I'm here for you if you need me.